Growing Together program, restoring people by restoring creation in churches, homes, and communities. Just by way of brief introduction, as I mentioned earlier, in preparation for beginning my dual master's in divinity and in the School of the Environment at Yale, and also in working as a creation care fellow in 2 different Episcopal parishes over the course of the last few years, and really being on the ground in this work like many of you have been, as well as being a part of Churchlands, which is a cohort of Episcopal priests and lay leaders who are doing regenerative work on their church lands. I have had a albeit brief but deep window into the real practicalities, the joys and the challenges of implementing creation care work and liturgy and practice in church communities. And then together with my partners Russ and Becky, who have spent over the last 20 years working with over 120,000 churches, we really saw a need for something like the Growing Together program that is holistic, in that it addresses as much of the nature of this work that there is to address in really practical ways that are accessible for the volunteers and lay leaders who are often leading this work in their congregational spaces. So that's kind of how this program came to be. We'll just keep going here. And this is, again, the plan for our time, which we already talked about. So I won't go over that again, but that just gives you a visual sense of where we'll be going today. And another visual sense of the flow for our presentation. And so beginning with inspiration, the philosophy behind the Growing Together program and the pilot that you are all here interested in being a part of. As you all know, many of you I'm sure deeply know, over the last 30 years, crucial work has been done in caring for our common home, kind of weaving this relationship between science, environmental care, and our faith. And a lot of this work has been done by places like Yale's Forum for Religion and Ecology, Earth Charter, Catholic Climate Covenant, Interfaith Power and Light, so many of these organizations to which we owe a debt of gratitude, because imagining without their work and without their continual work, imagining a holistic program like the Growing Together program would not be remotely possible. So we cannot overstate our gratitude to you, to this host of organizations doing this work, and everyone committed to it still. So much gratitude to share in that regard. And a pair of letters that really has continued to serve as a testament to interdisciplinary multi-faith collaboration in this work of reinvigorating our flourishing Earth community is this pair of letters from first a group of scientists and then religious leaders who wrote in response. The first letter is the open letter to the religious leaders for science and religion, which was spearheaded by Carl Sagan in 1990. And the letter in response by the religious leaders was the Joint Appeal on Religion and Science statement by the religious leaders. And so this was their reply to this letter that the scientists wrote, appealing to this group of religious leaders to work together on this journey of caring for our common home. And so just to ground our time, and really the heart of this work and this Growing Together program, I'm going to read just a short quote from the scientists and then a short quote from the religious leaders in response. So to begin with the scientists, they write, efforts to safeguard and cherish the environment need to be infused with a vision of the sacred. If we do not understand the problem, it is unlikely we will be able to fix it. Thus, there is a vital role for religion and science. We hope this appeal will encourage a spirit of common cause and joint action to help preserve the earth. And then the religious leaders wrote in response, we reaffirm here in the strongest possible terms the indivisibility of social justice and ecological integrity. We must pray ceaselessly that we will take full measure of what this moment in history requires of us. In this challenge may lie the opportunity for people of faith to affirm and enact at a scale as such as never before, what it truly means to be religious. So again, the letter from the scientists coming in 1990, and then this response from the religious leaders in 1992, really hearing so much of the Laudato Si in these early letters. So I hope that these provide a framework for the work that we're really here to do. And a little bit now about our advisors. Some of these scientists and theologians, in a similar spirit to the collaboration evoked in these letters, it was crucial to us in developing the Growing Together program, the pilot program, to really do this in tandem with scientists, theologians, activists, people who are doing this work in farm communities at the intersection of faith and farming, so that we drew upon all of the knowledge that has come before and is still going on. So just a brief note about some of our advisors who are with us in developing this program. Yale Forum for Religion and Ecology, Mary Evelyn Tucker, particularly, is one of our core advisors. Oxford University's Laudato Si Research Institute. We have two wonderful theologians, and one actual person who leads up their social justice work there on our board of advisors. Also ECLIS, and this is a group of scientists primarily bridging this gap between science and faith-based organizations and churches. And Tom McLeish is one of our core advisors there. And then Plainsong Farm and Ministry, this is Nuria Love Parrish. She is the heart and spirit and mind behind Churchlands, which is the pilot cohort I mentioned earlier. And then KFOD, KFOD Linda Jones, she has done tremendous work in the Catholic context, developing curriculum, particularly the Live Simply curriculum. And so she is another one of our advisors. And this is just to name a few of them. There are several others, but we are incredibly grateful to be doing this work with them. And now, particularly getting into the Growing Together program. So an image that's become central to the Growing Together program is this funnel. And we really see the Growing Together program as a free toolkit, conversation guide, and community building resource to inspire conversations at the intersection of faith, environmental care, and justice in church and home contexts. So we really see the need that we're meeting as bridging this gap between faith and science, and justice that is inherent in that conversation. Also then to consolidate and simplify the resources that many resources that are out there in the world that are speaking of this work. There are tremendous resources, but it can be overwhelming. We've found, and I'm sure you've experienced, for a lay leader to get introduced to this wealth of information and be able to apply it in a way that makes sense for their unique context. So we hope to be doing a little bit of that work of consolidating and translating into a framework that makes sense for churches particularly. And then also to function as this kind of curating role to organize things in a way that's just very clear and easy to begin. And then so our particular program goals, number one is to map the theology and science of creation care. So each educational piece in our sessions throughout the pilot program will always have a theological piece and a scientific piece on a particular topic. So we're always going to be hearing from both theologians and scientists on a particular topic because we really feel that this conversation flourishes when these voices are held in tandem. The second goal is to model heart-led conversations. So this is acknowledging that conversations about faith and the environment can be divisive. And so with the support of conversation guides, we really want to model a way of having compassionate and honest conversations about the intersection of faith, justice, and environmental care. And then three, mobilizing. This is all about providing actionable steps so that as we learn about each of these topics, we can immediately respond together in a way that's sustainable across time. So that's why we really take this topic by topic to allow time for that application of the education. So these are our big program goals for the Growing Together program. And now I'm going to move us into kind of a broad conversation about the full scope of the Growing Together program, which the Growing Together pilot is drawn from. And before I show you the curriculum overview, I just want to acknowledge that this is a large overview. And again, the pilot is a consolidated version of this wider curriculum, but we did want to give you an idea of the scope of some of the things that are to come with the Growing Together program. So here we are. And so to begin with just an overview, so you get a sense for how these things are connected. The Growing Together program is made of 3 courses. Course 1 is about restoring us, and this is really shifting the lens from consumer to caretaker of Earth or co-participant in Earth, in regenerating Earth. And this is really designed for wider congregation application. So this is the course that you invite your whole congregation to participate in. This is really setting that foundation for linking faith, science, and justice, and how that is all a part of environmental care. And so this is really kind of this broad application course that's great for everyone in your church community to facilitate wider conversation, support, and ongoing energy behind projects and things that you're doing together in the creation, care, and justice work. So that's kind of the aim of course 1. Course 2 is about restoring place. So this is expanding the lens, really talking about church land and church buildings. This is modeled after the Living Building Challenge. And we are more than happy to walk churches through the Living Building Challenge if that's something that they're interested in doing, or just to have a really robust conversation about what ecosystem of place really means in a church context. And this course is designed really for a smaller team. So this is kind of your smaller green team, creation care team that hopefully has come out of the Restoring Us course, that you've created this energy behind this work, and now you're continuing it by doing larger projects, perhaps even, installing solar panels, which some of you have done here, which is fantastic. And then course 3 builds on this with this smaller teamwork, taking this creation care work out into your wider neighborhood and doing it with your neighbors. So again, the last 2 courses are really designed for the smaller teams that have come out, hopefully, of this foundational course in creation care, which is course 1. The Growing Together pilot, which, as you know, is running January through May 2021, is 5 sessions and really designed for the wider congregation. So congregations which are made of some leaders, which many of you are leaders of this work in your congregational spaces, and also just participants who are curious. So it's really this open space to provide that foundation, and also the going deeper resources for the leaders who are already engaged in this work. So that's kind of the way the Growing Together pilot is situated in the wider curriculums. And just very briefly, not to overwhelm anyone, but just to give you a sense of some of the topics that will be in course 1, and again, will be available for churches to go through and use at their leisure, however it makes sense for them. These courses will be available in fall 2021 and live online for you to use educationally as it makes sense. But course 1, as I mentioned, Restoring Us, really talking about this framework of good on multiple levels. How can we eat, purchase, buy, grow in a way that is good for us, good for our neighbors, and good for the wider creation? So these are some of the topics that we deepen into in course 1, again, being developed alongside our advisors. And then course 2 expands this lens to place and whole ecosystem of place. So this is really where we're talking about goodness on multiple levels, good for you, neighbor, and creation in terms of energy, water, sustainable building materials, equity, access, accessibility, beauty, All of these things are addressed in year 2, following the Living Building Challenge model, and the petals of that Living Building Challenge, which are place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty. So just using that as a holistic framework for having this conversation and talking about the science and theology behind each of these topics educationally. And then course 3 is about restoring neighborhood, again, expanding that lens even further, and to say once more that these last 2 courses are really designed for the furthering and development of your Creation Cure team or your green team. Of course, if there's people from your congregation who are interested in this educational material and support, absolutely, it's there for them too. But really, our course 3 is about taking this work into the neighborhood and seeing the church as a hub, but also a place of teaching and engagement, and really weaving these connections and uplifting the natural teachers and gifts of the people that are already in your neighborhood. So really, really doing this neighborhood work in course 3. So that hopefully gives you a sense of the wider breadth and depth of what's coming with the Growing Together courses and curriculum that's being developed with our advisors. But now, to speak to particularly why you are all here, the pilot, these are the session topics for each of our large group sessions that will be held once a month, and there's more on that practicality in just a few moments. But these are some of the topics that we will be going through in each of our 5 months together. We have kind of faith, science, and creation care, connecting those dots, eating, theology of food, thinking about scientifically and theologically. Also then moving into purchasing, how we live, how we purchase, the theology, science, and ethics behind those choices. 4 is about anything that cycles, but recycling, soil, compost, really beginning to attune to the land. And then 5 lands in growing, thinking about how we can be regenerating a regenerative presence on the church land, homeland, communities that we are a part of. So these are our topics for the pilot session, or the pilot cohort that you all are here curious about. Okay. Now moving into really the nitty-gritty practicalities of what will the flow of our pilot session meetings be like. So this will give you a sense for just the flow of our time, our monthly gatherings. So the session structure for the pilot program and the educational model actually for the whole Growing Together program is really inspired in form, not in content, from Alpha, which we feel does a really good job of creating a safe place for difficult conversations. So we took inspiration from their structure. And each session, and these sessions will be happening on Zoom, our once a month sessions will be happening on Zoom because this is the time we're in, but one day perhaps in person. We'll begin with this time of connection. So just being human together, telling stories on a particular topic. If that's the theology of eating or the theology of food, then we'll talk about food for a few minutes. Just being human together. Then we'll move into this time of education, a short educational piece, about 15 minutes, teaching from both a scientific and religious perspective. Then move into an inspirational story, just highlighting an organization or church doing this work well. Then really moving into this time of conversation where we're modeling compassionate, honest conversations about the educational material, which will be facilitated by breakout rooms in Zoom, which I'm sure you're all well familiar with. And then we'll always close with the time of implementation. What does this mean for us? How can we implement this in our context? And be providing tools and resources for those steps. And so just to give you a real visceral sense of what this means and how this would work, this is actually a sample session from the pilot. It's our second session after our introduction session. And I'll just walk you through this, and this will just give you an idea of how a Zoom session would flow, our Zoom gathering would flow. So eating, theology of food, this is session 2 in the pilot. So just beginning with this time of connection, what are some of your favorite memories around the table? What is your connection to food? What do you enjoy cooking and eating? Where do you usually get it from? These sorts of things. And then we'll move into a time of education. These videos are not solidified. We might change them a little bit for the pilot, but for now, this is kind of an example of what we're thinking about. So a brief educational piece from theologian Norman Wiersbe on the theology of food, him speaking about his book, particularly Food and Faith, and then really talking about the science. What is the carbon footprint of our food, and how can we think about that impact on both the environment and our neighbors? So those are the two educational pieces. And then an inspirational story. Creature Kind is a fantastic organization, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, that helps churches or faith-based organizations integrate their faith with what they eat. So it's just a short video on them by creating ethics of eating. And then moving into these discussion questions facilitated by conversation guides. One question might be, what, if any, what kind of relationship, if there is one, is there to our faith and the kind of food we eat and buy? And should there be a relationship? And then another question would be, or could be, how does the food we eat and buy impact the environment and our neighbors? So thinking about these things together. And then really landing in this call to action. One call to action might be, or one way of implementing in response to this educational material might be to create an ethic of eating for your church or for your home, by way of intentionally linking your faith to what you eat and buy, and how that impacts your gatherings at church and home. So just one example of a call to action. And then each session always will be followed up by going deeper resources, which we will give to you via email and our online community platform. And these are just resources for you to continue to learn and grow, to continue to implement. And we will always be sending these after each of the sessions, and they will live on our website as well. So you can come back to them at any time. Okay, and then the pilot program. So now, particularly after you've seen this big broad scope of things and gotten a real zoomed in picture of what the flow of the Zoom sessions will be, just some practicalities about the pilot program, and then I will close and we will have plenty of time for conversation and questions, I promise. Thank you for hanging in there with me through this presentation. So just an overview of some practicalities. The pilot is running January through May of 2021. It is free for all participants, leaders, it is free. That was very, very important to us to make it as accessible as possible. There will be monthly large group sessions, so one group session per month. They will be 1 hour, similar to in this format, and they will be facilitated by the Growing Together team, so me and our team. And they will happen the second Thursday of each month at 7 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern. So there will be two time options available to accommodate both East Coast and West Coast. And then there will be once a month, optional but encouraged small group meetings with your congregations to really talk about what implementation might look like in your congregational context, in your local context. And then there will be online discussion supported by the Growing Together community platform, which we will get everyone who registers, participants and leaders plugged into, so that we can continue to discuss these going deeper resources. We can be community together. We can encourage and inspire each other across all of these different locations that we will be coming from. So these are kind of the big components of the Growing Together pilot program. And then a question that we've been getting a lot and we wanted to spend some time with is, who is this for? And what we love to say is that whether you have experience or not, you are welcome, and there is a role for you to play. And so really this is for both participants and for leaders. So for participants, these are just people in your congregation who you think would love to be a part of this conversation. And they're all that is asked of them is to simply attend and participate. That's all. But really vital to have as many people in this conversation as possible to, as you know, to garner up support and curiosity about these conversations. And then the second type of person that this pilot is for are leaders, and many of you are leaders in this space. And really the role of leaders is to invite the participants and then to facilitate when we are in our large group gatherings, for example, our once a month sessions, we will break out to small groups via the breakout rooms, and just to be willing to facilitate conversation with whomever may be in those breakout rooms. And we will provide support for leaders every step of the way. So we don't want that to be an overwhelming invitation, but just by way of having both people who are just showing up and people who are also just showing up, but also willing to facilitate as invited. So those are the two types of people that this program is for, and everyone really truly is welcome. And so that leads us finally to next steps. And we will send you a reminder email with all this information, so don't worry if you're feeling overwhelmed. But we're asking leaders if you could register by December 15th so we can get you plugged in. And then you can continue to add participants or even additional leaders after that point, but just so we can get at least your church plugged into all of the resources and platforms and things like that. And then, of course, another next step is just to continue to invite people who you think may want to participate in this program. And so that closes the presentation. And again, we will be sending you a reminder email with all this information after our time together, as well as a recording of this video. So I'm going to close now and stop sharing the screen and open up the floor for feedback, questions, anything you may like to share. So the floor is now yours. Thank you for listening.